Pink Gelato writes, over the past few years, I've collected a ton of paper. Paper packs, random sheets, you name it, I have it. I want to start really using it, since I know I have so much. However, whenever I finish a page, I realize I've still used minimal amounts and I'm not making progress. Sometimes I feel like the papers I've chosen don't match well and I get discouraged. How can I make some layouts by using paper more generously? Glitter Girl, can you help Pink Gelato pile on the pattern paper?
Of course I can. Today I'm going to be working with lots of pattern paper. So if you're someone who prefers to stretch the paper as far as you can go, please keep in mind that this is not the question that's been asked today. And I may be using more pattern paper than what might make some scrapbookers comfortable. On the other hand, there are scrapbookers who have thousands of sheets of paper and would rather get them used and on layouts in that style than just have them sitting there getting dusty. So I hope you can appreciate this design with a little bit of that in mind. And for those of you who do have plenty of paper, let's see if we can get you using it today. So a few different things that I'm going to point out as we go along. Today I'm using two 4x4 photos. These are photos from my phone, and I just wanted to show you before I trim them today because I'm not sure if I have shown you how I get my 4x4 prints, because I do probably about 95% of my photo printing through an online photo printer. I have a photo printer at home. It's really nice quality and it's been a long-lasting printer. I really like it, but I prefer the kind of printing you can get when it's an actual developed print. Uses the same technology as a photo lab did before we were shooting digital, rather than the kind of print that goes through a printer and it's just adding ink on top. Now there are online printers who do that, do both kinds, so it's worth doing a little bit of research. Of course, I'm not in the same country as many of you, so you may need to do a little research on the printers in your neighborhood. But I find that if I print once a month, and I take a lot of pictures, so once a month or twice a month depending on how many things we've been doing, and then I get my individual prints at a really, really good price. But what I do with my phone photos is I just select the 4x6 option because the printer I use makes it far cheaper to print a 4x6. And they come like this because you can choose either to blow it up across the whole 4x4, which would then crop out some of the image, or for it to all fit, which means I'm going to get the borders an inch either side. So I just stick those through my photo trimmer, put the white bits in recycling, and off I go. So it's really, really simple. And for me, that's really cost effective, and I get really nice quality prints. Love how the colors look and stuff like that. Okay, that's enough about that. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to be using two 4x4 prints today, and I've used one of the two-piece December printables. This is the one in the shop called Hello Forever December printables. Okay, and there's actually one more printable on the sheet. It's a big box right here. I believe it says Merry, but it's a solid box with white lettering. And the first thing I wanted to do with my pattern paper here was to use the printable on top of the pattern paper instead of on white paper to see how that would be a different look and give it a little bit more variety. So I was looking through patterns that would be good for printing on. So I ended up choosing this one from October Afternoon, which has this print on the other side. That's from October Afternoon's Silent Night collection. But I had a few others here that were really good, kind of on my short list. These would both be designs that could be printed on really easily. This is from Crate Paper, and this one's from Glitz Design in their Christmas collections. So what I normally look for if I'm going to use printables on top is something that is not too busy, not too bold, and doesn't have too many colors in it already. And usually not a text print if the printables have text. I think that this print from October Afternoon could work really well if you're going to print images on top of it. But I think if I printed these tags that have just wording on them on top of the letters, I'm pretty sure it would be very difficult to read, even though there's still only two colors going on here. In fact, same two colors as the one I used. And so I tend to keep that in mind printing images on text works great, and printing text on images works great. Does that make sense? But it can get a little confusing if you do text on text. Okay, so there was this one big box here that was a solid color. I didn't think that it's like a gold color. It's really, really pretty, and if you're going to put it on a white, it would go really well with all the different supplies I've pulled out today. But it was a color that I didn't think would print well on this pattern paper that I wanted all the other bits for. So I opened the printable in Photoshop and just cut this one out, and you can do that with any editing program that lets you cut out part of the image. So I cut out that box and printed the rest of the sheet as it is. I just cut the pattern paper down to 8.5 by 11 so I could stick it through my printer. And then I'm going to use a circle punch with some of these bits. I'll cut some of them out by hand, and that just gives a very different look to the same design. So if you've bought a set of printables and you want to get more use from it, try printing them on some pattern papers because they're going to look different in every different design. Okay, and then I'm going to get started creating this layout, and the next step to using more pattern paper is that I'm obviously not going to use any solid papers. You'll find that I very rarely use solid cardstock these days. I do prefer to do all my layering in pattern paper wherever possible. I really love the texture that it adds, but I do try to balance and kind of come up with the pattern paper version of a solid sheet of cardstock. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because I don't mean a solid color that has no pattern or texture that's just the weight of pattern paper. I mean that I'm looking for things that are neutral enough that they have the same visual weight on the page, or a very similar visual weight, and they don't offer so much that they're going to distract from a bolder pattern. So I'm going to be using that trick of one pattern paper in the very background and then another box on top of it, and I want to balance something that's bold with something that's more neutral. So I've pulled out these two as options for the background. These are both from October Afternoon Silent Night. A red giant chevron and then a red kind of candy cane inspired diagonal print. There's the other sides of those, which are also lovely. And I'm going to use the red as the frame all the way around the outside edge, but I want to put something more neutral on top of it so that I can then build my page on this bit and it will be more in line with the neutrality of a solid sheet of cardstock. It's not as neutral, but it's more neutral than designing on top of this and then trying to make the photo stand out against that really bold paper. So there's 2 sheets of pattern paper going into the background straight away. Of course, if you would prefer to stretch your pattern papers more, cut out the box from underneath so that you can save this bit of pattern paper for later, or leave the frame step out entirely. But if you have lots of pattern paper, then this can be a way to start using those patterns a bit more. So other combinations I was choosing from, I also like this little text print on the red background on either of those. And I still have that neutral from Glitz as well. I think this would look really lovely with certain kinds of photos, but I think something a little bit softer than the pictures I have. I think these are a little too modern for what I want for this pattern paper. So I think I'm going to go with that wood grain from Crepe Paper. Then it's just a case of, do I want the giant chevron or the diagonal? And I'm going to go with the diagonal because once I use this in the center and you're just seeing a frame around the 4 edges, with the stripe, it works all the way around the edge. And the pattern is obvious. And there's nothing that I'm distorting because of that. With the chevron, however, when I put this over the edge of the chevron, I'm going to get what looks like a diagonal stripe over here and what looks maybe like a chevron, because I've seen another chevron before, but if I hadn't seen a chevron, I'm not quite sure what that pattern is. It distorts the pattern paper. So with this chevron, even though this is a really bold pattern paper, this would work better with the design where I was only going to use maybe a third or half the sheet and put it up here at the top. But today I'm going to do more of the sheet, more like a full square across the background. So that's not going to be my background choice today. So go ahead with wood grain and the candy cane stripe. I'll get those trimmed and in place and get my photos trimmed as well and start cutting apart my printable on the pattern paper. My next step in adding more pattern paper to this page is to put plenty of pattern paper right behind the photos. So I started with that gold print on the Craft, that's a Studio Calico pattern paper, and then found a couple other pattern papers to bring together the color scheme I wanted to use, which had traditional Christmas colors plus that Craft or light brown neutral in the gold, but also some aqua mixed in with the red and green. So I've stacked these up, and sometimes these papers aren't perfect. For example, this one I had already used part of it, and I'm actually missing this tiny little corner up here, but it's not going to show at all once the page is done. And I've just cut them so that they are a little bit bigger with each mat, and I have quite a substantial border around the photos so that you can see that this pattern is stars and also be able to still take in the photographs. Now I'm using brown ink on the edges of the red and the brown and the gold pattern papers, but I don't like brown ink on aqua papers usually. I find that there's something about the coloring there that just doesn't work perfectly for me. So I decided I'll do something different to make the aqua pieces a little bit more special, and I'm going to use some aqua embossing powder and Versamark around the edges of these. And this technique is really simple and it works really well on wintry pages because you can choose whatever colors you want and it will look a little bit like snow if you choose white or just kind of then more metaphorically snow if you're going to use something like aqua. So all I'm going to do, I'll show you on this smaller piece, that's probably easier, is to take my Versamark embossing powder, or embossing ink pad, sorry, and go around the edges. And then everything else from then on is just like normal heat embossing of a stamped image. It's exactly the same technique. I'm just going from the ink pad directly to the paper instead of with a stamp. Now, if you have a nice little border stamp or something that would fit well in the corner, you can also do that, of course. But I just wanted to do this instead of inking the edges. So add my embossing powder. And take off the excess. Give me just a second to funnel all this back into the bottle, and then I'll heat up that card. If your work surface isn't heat safe, make sure you put down a mat or something so you don't scorch your table, and hold these in place just to make sure. And then just using the heat to heat it up until the powder melts into that finish around the edge. And there's my finished card with everything embossed around the edge, so I don't have any loose powder there. And I have that little glaze design that just works a lot better for me than the brown ink on that particular color of paper. So I'm going to do that with the different aqua blocks that I'm going to include, like this big holly square. And for those of you who worry about using your favorite pattern papers, I just want to show you something really quickly here. This is the reverse of that red chevron. And at the beginning I said, oh, this red chevron would be great as a 12 by 12 background if I was doing a design that was just going to stay in 1/3 or 1/2 of the page, because then you would still see plenty of the chevron. And I know that that's something that could make you then go, oh, I'm going to save that red chevron for a special project because then I know I have that pattern paper and it can work really well as a background. This is the only sheet of it I have. I have no intention of buying another one, and I did go ahead and cut it up. There's nothing horrible that's going to happen because I have plenty more sheets that can do that same thing of that whole idea of I can put it in the background and use 1/2 or 1/3 of the page for the design. I don't need to stress too much about it being a very specific pattern paper. I can always find something that will work in that same thing, especially if you're somebody who has a nice big stack of papers that you're saving for a rainy day. So I just thought I would throw that out there in case that helps you have the courage to cut up the papers that you're saving for something special, even though you don't know what that something special is. As I start to mark out the embellishment and where things are going to go on the page, then I can use more pattern papers, and I can use small scraps at this point because I don't need any more giant pieces of pattern paper. Or I can use pieces left over from what I have. If I'd gutted the background sheet, I could use snippets of this little stripe. I've taken a Studio Calico Joy pattern paper, and I'd already used some of that on another project, so I just have a little bit of it left. And I'm going to start dotting these little circle pieces from the printable around the page. But this could be any of those prints, and the place I wanted to go was that corner where it's torn, so I can make sure that that's covered up. By the way, when layering these pattern papers, I know these are a couple different bold pattern papers put together. They're bold designs, but they're designs that are really easy to recognize. So the holly is something that you don't need to see the whole 12 by 12 to know that that's holly leaves and little red holly berries. With the peppermints, the same thing. It is a bold pattern, but I know what it is by just seeing a little bit of it. So I can offset the patterns and not have to have lots of it on display because the patterns are recognizable. And that can help with things. So if I do the little red scallop piece behind each of these, then I have a little bit of contrast to pull up those printables that are all actually printed on the same sheet, because this is one of them as well. So I want them to look a little bit different. And that gives me a good idea now of where the little things are going to go on the layout. It also gives me space for my title and my journaling underneath. The reason that the journaling can go underneath is another vote in favor of using that more neutral pattern paper, something that's a little bit simpler than the bold print, because I can write straight onto this pattern paper and it'll still be legible. But it's not the end of the world if you've chosen a pattern paper and you get this far and think, oh, I can't really write on that and I can't read it. Sometimes I even think that a pattern will be fine for writing on, and then I start and I realize it's quite difficult to read. Then I just use another block, a journaling block, something like this that's designed to maybe to go in a pocket, because this is 3x4. So a 3x4 or 4x6 card or any size like that, and just pop it underneath with the journaling. You can always add another layer, it's not a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and add my title in here and my journaling underneath, and then come back with all of my embellishment to finish everything off. Everything important is on the page now, and now it's just up to your individual style to decide how much you want to add or how much you want to just keep it as it is. This might be completely enough embellishment and enough pattern paper and enough color for you, or you might like more texture, different things as we go. So I'm just going to start my embellishment and let you watch that process, and I'll just stop when I think I have enough of everything. I have put all my small Christmas embellishments in a box, and then I have some different stickers as well, including all the different sticker sheets from the October Afternoon Silent Night collection. Now the Silent Night collection, and a whole bunch, hundreds of other Christmas products are in the sale at 2P's right now, and that sale on Christmas lines that runs just until this Friday, the 20th of December. So if you're looking for some Christmas bargains, or to treat yourself, or to arrange your own Christmas present, which is also allowed, there's plenty that is at a nice discount at the moment, so do stop by. I've put my favorites from the sale in the supply list that you'll find below this video. If you just click the link, if you're watching on YouTube, then when the page loads, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll find the supply list, and it'll have everything that I've used to make this page, and also some favorites from the sale. Okay, so I'm going to start adding in some stickers as well as the pattern paper. But for all of this, if you wanted to do it all with pattern paper, if you don't really have a lot of embellishment in your stash, but you have lots of paper, keep in mind that die cutting or punching those shapes or hand cutting them even can give you all sorts of embellishments without having to have all those extra bits. But I do really like the mix of the texture. Once I have this much pattern paper on the page, I like to bring in something a little different. And that's where I'm going to stop for today. So I've added in some stickers, a little word phrases, a few die cuts, one of the little flare badges from the 2-piece store, and some little stickers down here, and 3 little rhinestones. So you can find all the supplies at 2-piece. And this week I challenge you to make a layout with pattern paper, and don't hold back too much. Let us see all the different patterns that you'll mix together. Have a bit of confidence and don't worry that they have to all be from the same collection. You can definitely mix and match as you like, or you can keep it all to one set pack that you want to use up. So share whatever you make with that challenge with us in the gallery, and make sure you check the box for that tag. And I thank you so much for watching, and if I don't talk to you before then, have a very happy holiday. Thanks.
Join us next week for the continuing adventures of Glitter Girl and the ongoing mystery of the scrapbooker behind the mask at 2psinAbucket.com.